Hey all, Ian from Eurogamer here, and oh my do I have a surprise for you. Not only has long-lost zombie-kicking sequel Dead Island 2 risen from the grave in true zombie fashion, but recently I was also invited to London to go hands-on with a 20-minute demo of the game. Unfortunately, due to some unexplained behind-the-scenes shenanigans, Deep Silver wasn't able to give me any proper footage of the demo that I played, and I wasn't allowed to capture my own footage either, so sadly I'm going to have to rely upon a couple of new trailers and screenshots for the majority of this video's visuals. On the plus side, however, I did learn a huge amount about the game during my hands-on, and I'm going to share all of that juicy knowledge with you now. So if you're dying to know exactly what you can expect from this long-lost game and how it plays, here are 22 things any self-respecting fan of kicking zombies in the teeth needs to know about Dead Island 2. First up, did you know that this isn't the first time I've previewed Dead Island 2? The first time I previewed Dead Island 2 was actually back in 2014 when I got to go hands-on with the original build of the game at Gamescom. Wow, so this footage here is over 8 years old now? Huh, time flies when you're killing zombies, I guess. Back then, the game was being developed by Jaeger, but for whatever reason, that studio was removed from the project in 2015, and it's now in the hands of Deep Silver's Dambuster Studios, which has been developing the game since 2018. Don't expect to see any of this old gameplay in the new Dead Island 2 though, because Dambuster has basically made a complete fresh start on the game, which is now being built in Unreal Engine 4. With the development of Dead Island 2 starting again from scratch, it's unlikely that we'll see scenes and locations like these ones in the new game, but there are still a lot of familiar gameplay mechanics in Dambuster's game that fans of the Dead Island series will enjoy, mainly the melee combat and the elemental weapons, but more on those topics later. One thing is for sure though, the new Dead Island 2 looks way better visually than the original version, and it also seemed a lot more stable and polished than the build that I played all those years ago. So, with all this fresh start chat, you're probably wondering if there's even a connection with the first Dead Island game at all. Sure, Dead Island 2 is a sequel, but with all this time between the games, could it be pulling a Far Cry and just using the name to loosely connect a bunch of different stories together? Well, the answer is both yes and no, from what I can gather. Dambusters has done a lot of brand new world building with Dead Island 2's lore, so there's certainly a bit of a clean slate going on here, and we are in a completely different location to Benoit this time around. But even then, it does loosely follow the timeline of the original game. Whether there'll be much more in the full release to tie both games together is yet to be seen, but if you pay close enough attention to the trailers here, you might just spot a returning character from the first Dead Island. So, now that the tropical paradise gone to hell holiday resorts of Benoit are a thing of the past, where does that leave the setting for Dead Island 2? Well, as previously announced, zombie-infested Los Angeles, aka Hell A, is the destination for this sequel. According to a pre-hands-on briefing, the story here is that all the evacuation efforts have failed, the military has retreated, and because of this, LA has been left in total quarantine. In terms of gameplay, Dambusters has divided LA up into a series of districts. Some of them are really expansive, some of them are a little bit smaller, but they range from the beaches of Venice and Santa Monica to the luxurious mansions of Bel Air and Beverly Hills and beyond. You'll be able to travel between the districts as they unlock, according to story progression, and there are all sorts of side quests of various different types that go on within these districts. Each district has its own zombie population too, and they're all curated and dressed to reflect that area and, in particular, LA life. So, for example, if you were to head to Muscle Beach, you'd get introduced to loads of steroid-soaked hulking zombies, or maybe you'd bump into a rollerblading screamer that's wearing a helmet and zipping around on rollerblades. What Dambusters is basically trying to do here is avoid the faceless charging hordes of something like World War Z and make these zombies feel like they used to be real people. But that's enough about the background of the game. What about what I actually played? Well, the hands-on demo featured a mission from about 2/3 of the way through the game, and as such, the character I was playing as, Amy, already had a pretty full repertoire of skills and weapons. The demo was approximately 20 minutes long, and it started at the midway point of a level called The Boardwalking Dead, which I'm pretty sure is but one of many zombie-related puns that you'll find in the game. The action started on the shoreline of Santa Monica Beach at night time. It was an open area where clusters of hungry zombies shuffled around in swim shorts and bikinis. Ahead of me was a pier with a fairground built on top of it that lit up the night sky with multicoloured lights, the focal point of which was a massive Ferris wheel. Behind me was a walled-off area, a big concrete perimeter with CDC dome tents just visible beyond it. As the beach area was a nice, wide-open space, I was able to hone my zombie-whacking skills before making my way towards the pier, where the gameplay then became more linear and story-focused. Once on the pier, it became clear that my main mission was to retrieve something called the Blood Drive for an unseen character named Dr. Reed, but to do that, I first had to make my way along the zombie-infested pier towards a final showdown with a terrifyingly grim zombified clown called Butcho. More on him later. The pier was also full of some very cool environments to fight through, including an old video game arcade, the burnt, crumbling ruins of part of the pier, and a tense wave-based battle below the aforementioned Ferris wheel. So, we know about the demo now, but what about Amy, the character I was playing as? Well, Amy is one of 6 playable characters in the game. I'm unsure if there's any difference between them all, gameplay-wise, I'm assuming there is, but one thing's for sure, each one is a survivor who has been infected with the virus, but also immune to that virus's effects. Or at least most of those effects anyway, because as you play, your character will also experience powerful changes to their body brought about by the infection. I'm going to go into one of those changes in more detail later on in this video, but there were a few moments in the demo where Amy's vision went red and she mentioned something about knowing that someone was close, which makes me think that the zombie virus will help us detect powerful zombies who are nearby somehow. A bit of zombie telepathy or something, I guess? Whether this plays into the gameplay too much is unknown yet, but it was definitely used as a narrative device as I got closer to the boss fight with Butcho. Either way though, this zombie inside of you is something that you're going to need to come to terms with, embrace and utilise in order to survive. On the subject of players, I played Dead Island 2's demo in single player, but it was also confirmed at the event that you could play the game in 3-player co-op if you wanted. I didn't manage to see if co-op gameplay would support crossplay though, but Dead Island 2 is going to be available on PC, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X, and PS4 and PS5, so it seems highly likely that crossplay would be a thing.
Pumping through my veins.
Well,
Dead Island 2 is not only a mature rated game, it's a game that revels in its mature rating. And that's especially true for the game's Gore Tech system, which allows you to slice, dice, melt, bludgeon, and burn any zombie that gets in your way. We were told by the developers that the melee combat is super important in Dead Island 2, and that the heroes of the game shouldn't just be survivors, they should mainly be thrivers. People who are up for running towards zombies and kicking the crap out of them, rather than just using stealth to avoid them. To help make this as visceral an experience as possible, the undead have been given fully anatomically correct models, with everything from hair, skin, fat, muscle, bones, and all the organs in between stuffed up under their rotting skin. And all the damage you do to that mass of flesh is procedural too, so the way they fall apart should feel as organic as possible. For instance, sometimes when you hit 2 or 3 zombies with a serious melting attack from a chemical weapon, you can literally see them dissolving and falling to bits as they shuffle towards you. Now, here's some quick-fire points about the game's combat mechanics, starting with the fact that the combat here is way more tactical than in the original games. What does that mean? Well, basically there's way more to the game than just hacking away at zombies with sharp things. For instance, lots of the zombies in Dead Island 2 wear accessories like grenades that can cause a variety of very satisfying explosions if you manage to target them successfully. You can also attack specific limbs with your melee weapons too, which is something I really enjoyed doing. I'd crouch down in front of approaching zombies and I'd hack at their legs until one of them fell off. And then either the zombie would comically hop off on one leg, or it would topple down in front of me for an easy finish. And that easy finish has a name. It's called a skull stomp. Basically, if the zombie you've knocked over is injured enough, an on-screen button prompt will pop up, which, when triggered, will allow you to smoosh that zombie's skull with your foot like it was a ripe melon. It makes an excellently crunchy noise, and the gore goes everywhere. Now, dodging in video games isn't exactly a new thing, but in Dead Island 2, it's a really effective way to stumble your enemies and deal big damage. If you manage to dodge at just the right time when a zombie attacks, it kind of acts like a parry move and it throws the zombie off balance and staggers them, so you can trigger a counter-attack move, which lets you execute them in gloriously cinematic slow motion. One of my favourite things about the original Dead Island games was the dropkick mechanic, so I was super happy to see it make an appearance in Dead Island 2. Just jump in the air, hit the knockback button, and you'll be able to punt the zombies away from you, hopefully straight into something flammable. While the drop kicking was excellent, I was also surprised by how sluggish the movement of my character felt when compared to, say, Dying Light and its parkour system. Obviously, these two are different franchises, so it's not really fair to compare them both, but I kept wanting to do some cool slides into zombies and leap over objects, only to find that most objects weren't climbable and that the length of my slide was super short and only really useful for quickly ducking under certain parts of scenery. So instead of normal throwables, in Dead Island 2, you have something called curveballs. Curveballs are throwable items like grenades or zombie-attracting bait bombs that, once owned, can be added to your loadout and used as many times as you wish. Now, these curveballs are subject to cooldown time between uses, so you can't spam them, but you can equip two at once and swap them out on the fly with others in your inventory, depending on your situation. It did seem a bit odd having what amounts to basically an infinite supply of grenades in my pocket, sure, but I did appreciate the fact that it also let me enjoy the action of the game without having to continually pause my progress and go scavenging for items to allow me to craft more throwables.
Pumping through my veins.
Well, sounds like
Remember when I mentioned embracing the zombie inside of you? Well, one of the ways you can do that is by triggering something called Fury Mode, which makes you drop your weapons and tear away at the zombies with your bare hands. This superpowered attack felt a lot like Far Cry Instinct's Predator power to me, as it gave me a boost of speed and heavy damage resistance as well. It does wear off pretty quickly though, but it's a great way to clear out a crowd of zombies when you're really in a jam. Now, during the demo, I didn't get time to play around with many of the menus, so I'm not 100% sure how leveling your character works here, but I did notice something in those menus called the skill deck, which looks like it's going to be very important to the way you play the game. The skill deck is basically a card system for your perks, and you seem to be able to swap out those card perks whenever and wherever you like. These cards are split into 4 categories of skills: abilities, survivor, slayer, and something called Newman, which is a word I'd never heard of before, so I googled it, and Wikipedia says that Newman is also used by sociologists to refer to the idea of magical power residing in an object. Now, I'm still not sure exactly what that means, but the possibility of magical objects really does open up quite a few gameplay possibilities, that's for sure. Just like in previous Dead Island games, your weapons get damaged the more you use them, and they'll eventually break. But also, just like in previous Dead Island games, you'll be able to fix those weapons at workbenches, as long as you have the required components, that is. I found a huge variety of weapons in the demo, including firearms as well, and they're all separated into rarity, so some will do way more damage than others. At these workbenches, you can also add attachments and upgrades to your weapons too, the most common of which seem to be elemental effects like electricity or fire. Unfortunately for you, however, it's not just the weapons that can have elemental effects. Certain powerful zombies also have elemental powers too, like the one I fought in the arcade, which shot arcs of electricity at me through the air. These electrical bursts arced between other standard zombies that were also in the area, and it filled the air with hurty, burny electricity that made it almost impossible for me to kill the beast with anything but a ranged weapon. Thankfully, a well-thrown Molotov cocktail curveball managed to incapacitate that electric zombie just long enough for me to run in and smash its face off with a giant gas-powered hammer. One of the best things about the combat in Dead Island 2 was the way that the sandbox nature of the environment impacted the battles. Sure, you can go in swinging with a bat, but look closer and you'll spot things like generators or water canisters lying around that you can interact with. Activate a generator, for instance, and you'll probably turn on an old faulty wire somewhere that'll act as some kind of electrical zombie trap. But you could go even further than that by pouring the canister of water all over the area of the flooring that the exposed wire is lying on. That way, when you finally activate the generator, you will extend the range of that electricity trap. There's probably loads more ways to combine all of these elements in the game, but this was the main one that I found in the demo. As I mentioned earlier, the demo itself ended in a fight between me and a horrifying clown zombie called Butcho. A zombie clown is bad enough already, but Butcho really is gross. Most of the skin is missing from around his mouth, and the flesh from his arms has been removed to expose the bones, which have been sharpened into points, something that reminded me of the necromorphs from Dead Space. Not only was Butcho super fast as well, necessitating in lots of dodging in order to stagger him and deliver some big blows to his head, but he was also able to regenerate his health by feeding on the dead bodies that littered the pier. It took me about 3 tries to actually get into the rhythm of dodging his attacks and finally bring him down, so fighting this clown is no laughing matter. It was quite a unique battle though, so I hope that the rest of the bosses in the game are just as imaginative and gross as Butcho. One thing that I was very pleasantly surprised by in the demo was the level of detail in the environments. There seemed to be loads of cool environmental storytelling in the level design, and this should definitely encourage exploration, as there seems to be plenty of opportunities to discover secret areas in the game. For instance, in the demo, I noticed a dark opening underneath the boardwalk, so I popped my head in to have a look and spotted a thick trail of blood leading off into the darkness. As I followed the blood, I ran into a maze of shelving units which, once navigated, led me to a very surprising secret stash. Not only was there a high-level shotgun back there and a bunch of crafting materials, but after spotting a gigantic green bong and a huge glass jar full of weed, it quickly became apparent that I'd also found the safe house of a massive stoner. Sadly, the trail of blood suggests that they ended up less high and more die than perhaps they would have wanted, but nevertheless I thoroughly enjoyed hunting down this humorous little hideout. As a well-known lover of Easter eggs, I was very happy to discover 3 nods to previous Deep Silver games when I entered the arcade on the pier. These Easter eggs came in the form of arcade cabinets for Time Splitters 2, which you couldn't interact with, but you could see the logo of the game on the screen. Then there was another arcade cab for Metro Exodus, which again was a case of look but don't touch. And finally, I also spotted an arcade cabinet for Dambuster's latest release, Homefront the Revolution, which, when interacted with, made Amy say something about having to find a power-up. It's a real shame that so far none of these arcade cabinets seem to be playable, especially considering the high-quality Time Splitters 2 Easter egg in Homefront the Revolution, but this large concentration of Easter eggs in just one area makes me hopeful that the full game will have loads of them dotted around. And finally, you're probably wondering when you'll be able to play Dead Island 2 for yourselves. Well, the answer to that is currently February the 3rd, 2023, although I'm sure you'll be forgiven for taking that date with a pinch of salt. Saying that though, we were told that the game is fully playable from start to finish right now, and that it just needs polishing to make it ready for release. So rest assured, unlike the previous version of Dead Island 2, this one will actually see the light of day. Whew, and I think that is pretty much everything that I learned, which isn't bad for a 20-minute demo if you ask me. I had a great time with Dead Island 2, even though the high production values mean that it has lost a little bit of that janky charm of the first game. The level of detail in there was really impressive though, and I am super excited to explore more of Hell A at some point in the future. When I do get another chance though, I'll be sure to keep you lot updated. So like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games and more Dead Island 2 coverage in the near future, and let us know in the comments below what you think of the game now that it's finally actually going to come out ever. Goodbye.